Hey, welcome back to the JUNIUS MALTBY channel. Good morning this morning. Let's take a look at this headline over in Europe. Turkey's president renounces US dollar in bid to boost lira. Now, I wonder what's driving all of that. I'm sure there's a lot more to it than even what we're going to read here in just the headlines and taking highlights out of the story. But Turkey's president renouncing the US dollar, this has happened in the past with other countries and other presidents and individuals. Little disputes here and there. Some interesting dynamics here to look at and take apart. And I'll let you guys formulate your own opinions on what you think is going on. But Turkey's president, Tayyip Erdogan, I believe his name, even though there's a G there, is pronounced Erdogan, addresses local administrators in Ankara, Turkey, Wednesday, December 7th, 2016. Let's read through some of this. Istanbul, Turkey's president Tayyip Erdogan has renounced the dollar in favor of the ailing Turkish lira, in keeping with his appeal to Turkish citizens to do the same. Presidential spokesman Ibrahim Kalin said Thursday that Erdogan had exchanged all of the foreign currency in his accounts into Turkish lira after urging his citizens to give up the greenback. Erdogan called on Turkish citizens last week to convert savings held in foreign currencies into gold, and Turkish lira to help boost the ailing currency, which recently dropped above 3.5 lira per dollar, the weakest exchange rate in more than a decade. Turkish citizens often hold their money in dollars, euros, and gold to mitigate the risk of a rapid devaluation of their currency. Sounds like people in Turkey are quite smart. Another snippet of the article. This is the article that I first saw, which led me on some links and searches on more information regarding this topic. And guess where it all came from? One of the great viewers here on the JUNIUS MALTBY channel. That's how a lot of this, sometimes this information comes right from you guys, I'm not the only one out there searching, reading, and finding material to talk about here. I appreciate it when you guys can send an article such as this, give me a heads up to it, because I overlooked it. I didn't see this in the news recently, and it was over there on GATA's website. Of course, we saw this. We talked about this a video ago. Gold appetite hitting a 5-year high in November as prices tumbled. Just wanted you guys to remember I think it's a key point. The fact that prices tumbled, we saw the appetite immediately gobble up gold on the market. That's going to be a routine occurrence when we see these price dips. You're going to see people jump in and buy it up. Now, let's move along to a more interesting story. Rigged. Deutsche Bank under new probes from U.S. court, German authorities. Now, we've talked about Deutsche Bank, and we've talked about manipulations of the gold market, rigging of the gold market. A lot of times people think it's a conspiracy theory. That's not true. However, we know that it is. It's out there. The information's out there. My question now is, I don't debate whether or not gold, the markets regarding precious metals, gold and silver, both are manipulated. The question is why. The question is by who, and who allows it. It seems like it just continues. If the very institutions that hate these metals and think they're worthless, which you and I both know that they don't truly think that, I wonder, it's so confusing sometimes to think how these institutions can both defame gold and talk about it in such derogatory ways, and try to hide it, but yet they themselves, meanwhile, are stockpiling and hoarding the precious metal, and doing things to manipulate the price. But we see it. I know most of you here on the JUNIUS MALTBY channel obviously see it. I mean, you talk about it, you're here. The question, I guess, would be is the people that are out there that, I guess this is where I'm going with this, is the people that don't know these stories as well, but see them in the news. How can they see these stories at times, perhaps read it, digest the information, and still not question what they're told about gold on a routine basis? They see the dishonesty, they see stories like this come out, and then they continue to debate the merits of gold as something to even put money into, even though it's got a long track record of being a valuable asset. And then they see huge banks obviously doing things to manipulate it and hold gold. I don't know. Mystery. Deutsche Bank might have manipulated silver and gold prices in conspiracy with several other major leaders and rigged its in-house indices in order to capitalize on open market. Two separate probes by a U.S. court and a German watchdog respectively have alleged. Trouble for Deutsche Bank seems to be far from having ended. Earlier this year, the lender was badly shaken by a $14 billion fine imposed by the U.S. Department of Justice for the bank's malpractice in mortgage issuance dating back to 2005. So these are some headlines from this article, and then I'm going to give you another one here that's going to be pretty interesting. UBS was the third largest market maker in the silver spot market and could directly influence the prices of silver financial instruments based on the sheer volume of silver it traded. The lawsuit reads, conspiring with other large market makers like Deutsche Bank and HSBC only increased USB's ability to influence the market. So you can see silver's getting some active manipulation here as well. And I know a lot of you silver stackers are always paying attention to the manipulation of the silver market. And here you go, you have a culprit right now, Deutsche Bank. A targeted impact on the indices due to an increased level of trading activity could be concealed. Those investors can't understand the investments themselves, let alone the indexes, Craig McCann of Securities Litigation and Consulting Group said. Fundamentally, such a product as is great for investment bankers, not investors. So, the gold price manipulation lawsuit settled for $60 million. Deutsche Bank settles a case that alleges it and four other banks conspired to fix the price of gold. So they just settled. Rather than go to court and get all the facts out, rather than perhaps suffer for even greater amounts of money, they're trying to just put this thing behind them and get away from it. Which should tell us all something. I think something stinks here. I think there's a rotting carcass somewhere in the room, and I think Deutsche Bank knows where it is. Deutsche Bank's going to pay $60 million to settle this class action lawsuit, alleging, of course it's only alleging, who would pay something if it was just alleged? You know, I mean, they are rife with guilt here. They are guilty as it gets. I mean, they could pay if they were innocent and they knew they were innocent, they could pay their lawyers probably $5 million and take this to court, present evidence, and be found innocent. Instead, they're paying $60 million just to make it go away. According to documents filed December 2nd in the U.S. District Court, Southern District, New York, the bank has denied any wrongdoing. Of course, they did nothing wrong. The agreement was first forged in April, but now needs approval from the judge overseeing the case. The suit was first filed in 2014 to aim at the twice-daily gold price fix that for almost 100 years set the metal's price. It said the nearly century-old ritual in which 5 banks, including Deutsche Bank, then participated, created an artificial and manipulated market, unquote, that they were able to unfairly profit from. The suit and other investigations eventually led to a change in metal price setting methods. And what I think they meant by change was just other people are going to manipulate now. Since Deutsche Bank got caught, they got to find someone that's a little more careful. In October, Deutsche Bank agreed to pay $38 million to settle a suit that claims it acted to manipulate the silver market. That same month, U.S. District Judge Valerie Caproni denied a bank motion to dismiss the suit. The settlement does not affect the other banks that participated in the daily price setting ritual: Bank of Nova Scotia, Societe Generale, Barclays, and HSBC, whom I think are all guilty as well. So there you have it, further evidence, further proof of the guilt, the manipulation of both the gold and the silver market. So not only do we have gold markets being manipulated around the world, but we also have governments passing constant legislation. We try to keep an eye on any time a government tries to pass legislation or make rulings determining gold. And a lot of times that focus takes us to India, where most recently, we've seen other things occur there, but now we're seeing rules passed on which women are allowed to have what amounts of gold. So married women are now going to be allowed to have 500 grams of gold, and unmarried women 250 grams, clarifies the government. So highlights from this article: ancestral jewelry or that bought with declared wealth won't be taxed. Married women can have up to 500 grams of gold without fear of it being seized. Single women will be allowed 250 grams. Men will be allowed to keep up to 100 grams. The government clarification today on whether new tax proposals for undeclared wealth will apply to gold and other jewelry dragged into the spotlight a 26-year-old rule that says married women are entitled to more gold than unmarried women. So here we have India taxing jewelry, undeclared wealth, taxing gold. Just further evidence that gold is indeed wealth. It is undeclared wealth. This highlights right here why it is governments truly hate gold, why there is a true war on gold by the elite, by governments, and those tied to government, because it is undeclared wealth, because you can hide it from them and they cannot tax it, and they can't steal from you through the, quote, inflation tax. This will lead us to discuss inflation, how inflation is not about price increases. This is just kind of a little reminder, something I found on Mises.org, and we're not going to break this whole article down. We're just going to talk about some of the highlights here, the essence of inflation. So let's go back in time a little bit, do a little reminder. Historically, inflation originated when a country's ruler, such as a king, would force his citizens to give him all their gold coins under the pretext that a new gold coin was going to replace the old one. In the process, the king would falsify the content of the gold coins by mixing it with some other metal and return diluted coins to the citizens. And on this, Rothbard wrote, more characteristically, the mint melted and recoined all the coins of the realm, giving the subjects back the same number of, quote, pounds or, quote, marks, but of a lighter weight. The leftover ounces of gold or silver were pocketed by the king and used to pay his expenses. On account of the dilution of the gold coins, the ruler could now mint a greater amount of coins and pocket for his own use the extra coins minted. He could now divert real resources to himself. What was now passing as a pure gold coin was in fact a diluted gold coin. And it never took long for the public to learn of this and become aware of what was actually going on, and then prices would react and raise. This isn't the only reason, but this is one of the reasons during the 1792 Coinage Act, and when the Treasury and the structure of money here in the United States was first written into law and formed, diluting of the gold or the silver in the currency was death by hanging. It was done. They dragged you out of it. They would measure the coins and audit them for their purity. It never happened because, of course, the consequences were so great. The increase in the number of coins brought about by the dilution of gold coins is what inflation is all about. As a result of the increase in the amount of coins that masquerade as pure gold coins, prices in terms of coins now go up. More coins are being exchanged for a given amount of goods. Note that what we have here is an inflation of coins, i.e. an expansion of coins. As a result of inflation, the ruler can engage in an exchange of nothing for something. He can engage in an act of diverting resources from citizens to himself. Under the gold standard, the technique of abusing the medium of exchange became much more advanced through the issuance of paper money, unbacked gold. Oh, and it got far worse once we invented fractional reserve banking. Inflation, therefore, means an increase in the amount of receipts for gold on account of receipts that are not backed by gold, yet masquerade as the true representatives of money proper, gold. The holder of unbacked receipts can now engage in an exchange of nothing for something. As a result of the increase in the amount of receipts, inflation of receipts, we now also have a general increase in prices. Observe that the increase in prices develops here on account of the increase in paper receipts that are not backed up by gold. Hopefully I still have you. You're not confused or lost yet. But in the modern world, money proper is no longer gold, but rather paper money. Hence, inflation, in this case, is an increase in the stock of paper money. Just the increase in the money supply, right? We don't say that the increase in the money supply causes inflation. What we are saying is that inflation is the increase in the money supply. Inflation is about wealth destruction. Note that increases in the money supply set in motion an exchange of nothing for something. They divert real funding away from wealth generators towards the holders of the newly created money. This is what sets in motion the misallocation of resources, not price rises as such. Real incomes of wealth generators fall, not because of general rises in price, but because of increases in the money supply. When money is expanded, i.e. created out of thin air, the holders of the newly created money can divert goods to themselves without making any contribution to the production of goods. According to most economists, inflation expectations are the key driving factor behind increases in general prices. Once people start to anticipate higher inflation in the future, they raise their demands for goods at present, thus bidding the prices of goods higher. Also, according to popular thinking, workers' expectations for higher inflation prompt them to demand higher wages. Increases in wages, in turn, lift the cost of producing goods and services and force businesses to pass these increases on to customers by raising prices. Anyone who's part of any manufacturing union or anything, any union for that matter, who enters negotiations in labor contracts, you will notice that the consumer price indexes and a close look at inflation is always part of that agreement. They're always trying to get and compete and raise their wages with that of inflation. So it's kind of a self-perpetuating cycle. Because you can see where it's just it's systemic. Inflation is a systemic disease, but the host or the person who patient zero, the government, they never seem to be infected by it because they're the ones who can buy the goods on the market and the services in the market before the price increase. So therefore, they can cause the problem and never suffer the consequences. Of course, until it's too late. Until they burn their entire empire to the ground and fall apart like Rome. So let's move on. We'll talk about that in a moment. Now, on this, Mises wrote, to avoid being blamed for the nefarious consequences of inflation, the government and its henchmen resort to a semantic trick. They try to change the meaning of the terms. They call inflation the inevitable consequence of inflation, namely the rise in prices. They are anxious to relegate into oblivion the fact that this rise is produced by an increase in the amount of money and money substitutes. They never mention this increase. They put the responsibility for the rising cost of living on business. This is a classical case of the thief crying, "Catch the thief!" The government, which produced the inflation by multiplying the supply of money, incriminates the manufacturers and merchants and glories in the role of being a champion of low prices. Inflation. We've talked about it on this channel before. We've looked at what it did to Rome. Not saying it was the entire reason Rome fell apart. Of course, that's always going to be debated by historians, but it's become accepted to be one of the causes. And we've seen the consequences of inflation throughout history. We've talked about it here. We've mentioned other currencies, other countries, other governments that have been riddled with the negative impacts of hyperinflation. So take that into consideration and also use it as a window to look through when you're discussing gold, when you're discussing and you're trying to think of reasons why gold is manipulated, reasons why gold is legislated, taxed, hated. Why is there an assault, a propaganda assault on gold, a war on gold? Because it is the one place you can go. It's the one castle you can build for your wealth to defend against inflation, against that hidden tax, because you don't have to surrender your gold to the king any longer. You can buy it, hide it, And when the king's men try to take it, well, I'll let you decide what you do at that point. But one of the reasons I think the gold appetite hit that 5-year high as prices tumbled, and one of the reasons I think that Erdogan in Turkey is encouraging his people to buy gold and why they're trying to get away from the dollar, is I truly believe when you look at $20 trillion in debt, the gross and negligent spending that the U.S. government takes part in, and the mismanagement of the U.S. economy, the acts of the Federal Reserve, the days of the U.S. dollar have to be numbered. The rules that apply in economics and to currencies are not going to be suspended this one time for this one currency. The chickens will come home to roost, and when they do, those that are holding the dollar only will be left without a chair when the music stops. And so you have to consider and ask yourself, where do you want to be when the music stops? Well, hopefully, when the music stops, you have a chair, and that chair is gold. All right, take care. Thanks for tuning in to today's headlines and discussion. Thanks for taking part in the JUNIUS MALTBY channel. Appreciate you all being here. Have a good rest of your day.